Welcome. We're gonna give us a few minutes so we just get to enjoy some Sid. If you like the internet at all, lead singer. They're queer and amazing. So we're gonna hang out for a second before we get started. Again, this is LGBTQ liberation, past, present, and future. If that's where you're meaning to be, this is where you're at. And as we get ready to start soon, feel free to put name, pronouns in the chat. This will help me as questions arise that I can make sure that I'm addressing all of you with respect. Name, pronouns. If you were a weather, what weather would you be? Well, luckily, Sid started us off today. If you also need more Black queer musicians in your life, Spotify has a Black, Queer, and Proud playlist. It's great. So I'm Maisha. I'm the Youth Advocacy Program Manager at Gay City. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I see that y'all have some solid weathers happening in the chat. Thank you so much. If you want to put your name, pronouns, and if you were a weather, what weather would you be? Feel free to put that in the chat. Create a bit of different weather community space. So today, right, you're here, if you're in the right place, for LGBTQ liberation, past, present, and future. As people will, do things with time, we'll be here and we'll roll with this crew. A little bit about me. I've been at Gay City for 3.5 years now. I started in youth advocacy work. I've been saying 12 years for like the last 3 years. So 12 years ago. And that's sort of like the basis of all of my work. But what is Gay City, you ask? So Gay City, Seattle's LGBTQ Center, has been around for 25 years, right? We make sure that we attend to the needs of the community, right? In promoting self-determination, liberation, and joy. Some of the programs that happen at Gay City are broken into like our different departments of health services, youth advocacy, arts, and resources. So in health services, we have so many things, right? Started as the cornerstone of Gay City's programs in HIV, STI testing. So we have a PrEP program that also supports people getting on PrEP, free or reduced. HIV, STI testing, also free. Healthcare navigation, Orca Lift, so many things. In youth advocacy, where I live, the Youth Advisory Council, which is a group of youth who oversee our programs. Queer and Teen, which is our bi-monthly or bi-weekly Instagram live event for youth. And then training and technical assistance, like today. Arts program is where we house our artist mentorship program coming in the fall. And then resources where we have an LGBTQ resource referral line and LGBTQ library. So many things. If you are just joining, feel free to put your name, pronouns, and if you were a weather, what weather would you be in the chat? It's a great presenter tongue twister for me as well. So making sure that my presentation skills are really growing all the time in my diction. If you were a weather, what weather would you be? So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to gain understanding of history of some LGBTQ social movements, understand some of the impacts, right, of social justice, but just social, I guess. Gain an understanding of the importance of pride, right, as a wave that connects to all of those things, and then contextualize future movements and the role of self-determination. Community agreements. So because we have now created a small community together of people with all the weathers happening today and people here for this presentation, we're going to agree to make space for others to speak. Leave room for the uncomfortable, right? Growing doesn't always feel good, right? It's called growing pains for a reason. So it's important to lean in spaces of growing, but also recognize when things are not good, right? Uncomfortable doesn't mean pain. So if things are harder or you need a break, take a break. One of the best parts that I found of Zoom is you can turn off your camera and do whatever you want, right? Take a break if needed. Practice humility. Acknowledge intent versus impact. Talk from your experiences using I statements. I saw, I felt, I heard. And then what I said here stays here. You can take the lessons with you. Also, this presentation only works with radical consent. So if I ask you all a question like, is that okay? Can we move forward? Does that sound good? I need to hear answers. So does that sound like a plan? I got some thumbs. Perfect. Some nods. A nod. Another thumb. Perfect. Great. Again, because it only works if there is consent, or then it's not good, right? That's when it's harmful. Cool. Also, I come from a tradition and speaking background. Even though I'm from Southern California, I speak relatively fast. So if you need things said again, right, need them to be repeated, let me know. I can't know the things you need if you don't say them out loud, or I guess also write them down. Great. See some nods. Cool. That sounds great. That is understood. Perfect. Also, because of the nature of Zoom, if you have a question in the chat and you recognize I haven't answered it, it's probably because I didn't see it. So feel free to unmute and let me know, hey, I have a question, and restate your question. Throughout the presentation, I'll take breaks to maybe stop the presentation just to see y'all, to get like a read of what's going on or how you're feeling when questions are being asked or when things are being answered. Cool. So let's talk about it. Let's do it. Let's do the thing. So LGBTQ social justice movements, right? The fight for queer liberation is expansive and difficult to pin down. Just as LGBTQ people are not a monolith, neither are the movements for social change, right? LGBTQ social justice is giant, right? And has shown up in many different ways. So when we look at some of the movements, right? And again, some of them, not all of them, right? We gotta understand that LGBTQ people aren't a monolith, so neither are the movements. And equally, all of the movements don't always support all LGBTQ people. It works both ways. Tiny look. So we're gonna look at some we'll start off, early movements, right? And those movements, early movements were situated in visibility and safety, right? Early movements, if we think about it, right, all of the outlying social stigma right? Jail, murder, different, well, higher rates of murder of LGBTQ people, that would make sense that early LGBTQ movements were about being visible, right? And creating spaces together. So we see things like, we see people like Henry Gerber, early 1920s Society for Human Rights, which became like newsletter of Friends and Freedom. So you could get like a right sort of secret newspaper that was just like gay works, right? And gay people being able to communicate to each other with like your newspaper, which is really neat. This will be fun when I do this presentation in like 15 years and people are like, why would anyone use a newspaper? One person got that joke. Perfect, it was worth it. We have the Daughters of Bilitis in 55, which was a supportive organization for lesbians and queer women. So if you wanted to be out, right, as a lesbian or other queer identified woman, there'd be different chapters of Daughters of Bilitis where you could go to basically like a group, right, and just like be out together. And then you would leave and then you'd go back to your pretending hetero life. We can think then that expansion, right, of visibility and safety into the larger movements of marriage equality, right? And that marriage equality wasn't a social movement that was loved by the queer community, right? So we'll move then into marriage equality, right? 70s to 2015. That's it, that's the whole thing, marriage equality, right? A way of validating legally and socially the relationship structures of LGBTQ people, say particularly in lesbian and gay people. And then if we think about it locally, right, 2012 is when Washington State legalizes gay marriage with Equal Rights Washington, which, fun fact, they were housed at Gay City. Fun. So there was one really fun thing whenever back in the day, in the before times when I could go into the office, that I'd be in the auditorium. That's where gay marriage was won for Washington State. I'm from California though. So in 2008, gay rights was actually redacted, right? So we had gay marriage in California, and then in 2008, Prop 8 was the bill that was put on, funded by the Mormon Church predominantly, which is not actually based in California. And California lost gay rights, right? So the marriage equality was this really big battle across states and communities throughout 1970 to 2015 that showed up in a lot of different ways for a lot of different communities, right? And per city. Right, so maybe San Diego was doing some cool work, but right, LA was doing work in different ways. Marriage equality, again, really sort of that polarizing aspect of LGBTQ movement. So then we're going to look at some things going on right now, right? So we have, again, early movements, visibility and safety. We have some past, right, just a few years ago of marriage equality being about validation, right? Moving to present movements that are really focused on liberation, right? And liberation of the most marginalized of our communities. Thinking about the Equality Act, right, of 2019. Now National Center of Transgender Equality is sort of, that's what it's focused in. Or Gender Affirming Care Act, right, which insurers would cover gender affirming surgeries. And that's based out of Washington. Okay. So thinking about sort of that growth in the movements, right? What does that mean at the time of each movement that are happening? So what about these words and why do I keep switching terms? So you'll hear gay liberation, LGBTQ liberation, right? Different terms, gay rights, different terms, right? So gay liberation specifically is situated in 1960 to the 80s, directly based on the civil rights movement. As as so many movements were, right? Civil rights movement led to a lot of other, right, supportive liberatory movements. So, right, so we see gay rights, and this is particularly, there are two differences of gay liberation and gay rights, right? Gay liberation and gay rights, you're going to see farm workers' rights, right? If you have, again, I'm from California, so this is a big part of our history. But API and Asian rights, right? There's a lot of social movements that came out of civil rights as this larger time of change. I wonder if we'd see similar things happen in our society now. All right, great. So gay liberation was a direct call to action to radicalize community and combat homophobia, right? So this is where the term is really important of liberation, right? Radicalize community and combat homophobia, right? Global scale, so a lot of this will be situated in the United States as a frame of reference for all of us today, but on a global scale, right, LGBTQ social justice movements, right, have surpassed legalization and moderate social acceptance of LGBTQ people, but many countries are still organizing and fighting for basic civil rights, including decriminalizing being queer and trans. So we gotta think about as a global context, the United States has done some cool things, right? Doesn't mean that, well, we did it here, put check, done. Right? It is LGBTQ civil rights movements are being fought across the world. Also doesn't mean that just because the United States has done some, right, that countries that haven't gone there yet are lesser to be valued in different ways, right? It's not a moral stance, right? It's a stance of movement organizing. Okay, so we're going to take 2 seconds to just sort of think about that historical context, right? When we're saying liberation, right? We're thinking about these movements together. Questions and initial feelings on liberation as a context and history. So then now I can also see some of you. Questions, initial thoughts, feelings. Facts, right? That sort of the words being used. Right? What does it mean when we think about the terms for LGBTQ liberation, right? As gay rights, right? Very different from those things. What else? What else is coming up for y'all?
I think for me, just the ongoing nature of these things, right? It's not something that was settled in the past or present, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Right. Also that, right, is a continual building.
What comes up for me is where the language and wording is stemming from in regards to groups, mm-hmm. in particular how race is also the intersection in that.
Mm-hmm. Right. That especially in thinking about like the difference of gay rights and gay liberation, right? One is about radicalizing community, right? And we know that gay rights is specifically, right, movements of white, lesbian and gay people, sometimes bisexual people, but not often, of lesbian and gay people for usually political movements, right? Think about people leading marriage equality. What did that look like? If you're able to think about people leading marriage equality at the time, right? Predominantly white, cisgender, lesbian and gay people, right? Still an important and well-worthy fight of validation and support for our communities, right? But at the time, right, communities were also saying, hey, I want healthcare, right? Black Americans are like, but what about our trans community members who can't get name changes? So, the ways that those show up, and especially in that intersection of race, and thinking particularly about liberation as the movements that we'll be focusing on. Beans. Thanks, y'all. So let's put together some LGBTQ people, right, to help continue to think about what has happened in liberation. The many, right? So history is often focused on a single person instead of all the people of a part of it, right? So we can do this for name a movement, right? We'll say farm workers' rights and Chicano movement, Cesar Chavez. We'll do civil rights, Martin Luther King, civil rights, also, right? We'll do Rosa Parks, right? Even though we know that Rosa Parks did not work alone and she was just tired, right? It was a part of larger strikes. We know that Martin Luther King didn't just get up one day and said, I'm doing it, right? A part of larger organizing. We know that social justice movements aren't based off of one person, right? We can even think about how it's happening now, right? Greta Thunberg is a great youth. We know that also is a part of other organizing for climate change. Does a lot of things individually, but also does a lot of things collectively. So when we think about the way that history puts individuals on a pedestal, often to make sure that people don't think about organizing, right? We're going to highlight a whole bunch of LGBTQ people who are a part of larger movements. Okay. 1, Miss Major. Also, these are in chronological order. They're in the order that I thought would be fun. So, Miss Major, a gem on the earth. What a great person. Trans activist, founder of TDI Justice, which is like a organization that supports trans and intersex people who have encountered the criminal legal system. Has been an activist for forever. Also was at Stonewall and was in Oakland for a while, just being amazing. It was one of my favorite things about being in the Bay was being able to just like see Miss Major, and for her birthday, trans community still just like gives her dollars or say happy birthday, and Miss Major calls community members on their birthdays, and it's great. Fred Rustin, civil rights activist, activist for the gay rights movement, organizer of March on Washington. But where was he, you say? Well, pushed aside by other civil rights leaders because as someone working so closely with Martin Luther King, they're like, you can't do both. You can't do Black stuff and gay stuff at the same time. It's too confusing. We'll lose the continuity of the civil rights movement, and we are working specifically on Black people, right? A little bit of erasure of the intersections of Black communities and the ways that gender sexuality shows up in our lives. Fun fact, though, was recognized in 2013. We're gonna say it's 2013 with our Presidential Medal of Freedom. When did Bayard Rustin die? 1987. Yo, what a time. Alan Turing, because if we're going to do all of fun movements and great queer people to think about in history, why not add gay math? Alan Turing, achievement were recognized because he was gay. What a time. British mathematician, codebreaker, World War I, early computer designer, an AI pioneer. Again, it's a Turing test. So if you're a sci-fi nerd, you may know of the Turing test, which is a way to test, right, if AI is sentient, which is really fun and also terrifying. But yeah, Alan Turing. Bambi Saucedo, who is a trans activist based out of LA, president and CEO of the TransLadNet Coalition, and does like a lot of work around HIV trans rights movements, trans and LGBTQ immigrant right movements, really great movement artist. Also has a movie, I believe, with a short documentary. Oh, and the name's escaping me. And I want to say it's Bambi's name, but someone's going to look it up and then let us know. Thanks, whoever's looking that up. India Moore. Because, yeah, You may recognize India more from some of the things that they've done. Pose is one of them. But model actor activist, advocates for trans and non-binary representation, Black Lives Matter, creator of mutual aid funds and co-founder of Trans Santa, which is like a gift giving project for trans youth. Really cool. So just thinking of like all of those people, because it's a lot. Who are some LGBTQ people you want to add to this list? Who do you want to add to see reflected in our movements?
I personally, a couple of my personal heroes are Marsha P. Johnson. Someone just put Marsha P. Johnson in the chat. And I think of Marlon Riggs, who was a documentarian and activist who passed away of HIV in the mid-90s, I think. But his works are so amazing.
People into this group. Who else do we want to add? Thank you so much for adding those. Who are some other people? If it's happening in the chat, I will nominate someone to read them out.
Sylvia Rivera was just added, similar to Marsha there.
Other people we want to give life and word to.
James Baldwin, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Max. Looking over Baldwin. All right, who else? Ooh, Patrice Cullors, Felicia Garza, great group of people dead. Leaders and founders of the statement of Black Lives Matter. Anybody else? Awesome. So let's put a specific time in LGBTQ history, Pride, into context. And not just because it's close to June, right? When we think about LGBTQ liberation, right, there is a section that is like, Pride. And that's an important thing to think about too. So let's do it. Stonewall. You knew it was coming. It has to. We got to do it. Luckily, they were both said. So here they are, right? Led by Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, also some people may say Star, youth who was there, who might have actually thrown the shot glass and not the brick. There is history contention around this point, and the historians can figure it out. What matters is that it was based around, right, the discriminatory police raid lasting for 6 days. So I want to note, Stonewall, it says, right, but other ways of thinking that would be an uprising, and I offer this as term changes. Uprising of the patrons of Stonewall Inn Bar after discriminatory police raid, as were common of the time. Particularly, Stonewall, say, police abolitionist movement. So how did we get to Pride? So L. Craig Shoemaker was the part of the coining of the word, right? And the idea of Pride of being like an event, right? He says people did not have power then, and even now we only have some, but anyone can have pride in themselves, and that would make them happier as people and produce the movement likely to produce change. Pride is a movement and memorial and remembering of Stonewall uprising against discriminatory police raids and actions against queer people, specifically BIPOC trans people, right? That pride, right? Anyone can have pride in themselves, and that would make them happier as people and produce the movement likely to produce change. As a legacy, Pride is a celebration and of visibility of marginalized communities around remembering the work of Black and trans women and community uprising, and rooted in community safety and support. So when we think of like Pride of what it is now, right, as a party, the parts of Pride, right, the money parts of Pride, what are the ways that Pride still is related to the liberatory aspects of Stonewall? Will also include Compton Cafe, which is out of the Bay Area in San Francisco. I want to say San Francisco. Yes. Good thing I still remember all of my times after saying all these words today. Compton Cafe uprising in San Francisco, which is the same thing, right? Discriminatory police raids, which shut down the block. My partner went outside and the dog is crying because she's dramatic. But same things, right? Same thing as Stonewall, right? But lasting for a little bit more time. And that cafe actually didn't close, but there is memorial still about it in San Francisco. So we think about Pride now, right? How is Pride the same and how is Pride different? So how is Pride the same? How is Pride different?
I would say that Pride now continues to create visibility for this community where, you know, it's a good constant reminder, whereas in the past it was, you had to be pushed so far to be visible, whereas now we are getting better at doing Pride events and that kind of thing where we're continuously visible.
Mm-hmm. Facts, right? Visibility that is still in Pride. That's one way. That's like one really big part of Pride. What else? How is Pride the same? How is Pride different? This is very kind.
We keep unmuting at the same time. I sort of building on that comment, I think that in addition to visibility is this repudiation of the shame that certainly generations, including mine and before mine, were constantly communicated we should have about ourselves. And, you know, it's just this, it's been this constant sort of theme of Pride in my mind of just like, no, I absolutely reject that premise, and we will be ourselves and we will be out and about in public. So that stayed the same, I think.
That's what I was gonna, no, I'm just kidding. I was just gonna read M's comment in the chat, so it was acknowledged, which was, I've seen some celebratory drag shows during parades, so drag still being a prominent and now more safe component.
So I haven't done a lot of the history part of it, but I would think that we have a lot of more community participation. We have straight allies. We also have corporations doing their like Pride merchandise and hopefully donating to appropriate places. But so we have a lot more community input, help, participation that maybe they aren't gay themselves, but they are adding to that celebration.
I think too, that goes hand in hand with one of the ways that it's probably most different now in the, you know, the commercialization of Pride in the current era, which I know you touched on there, Beth.
Facts, right? The double-edged sort of the corporate participation of Pride, right? How can we make money off of y'all being happy, right? How can we make money off of saying that we're down? One of the big ways of that is different, right? Police presence at Pride, right? We think about the roots of Pride. It is the police abolitionist movement, right, against LGBTQ discriminatory raids. Police presence at Pride. This is a big point of contention across so many prides for so many years, right? That's just a thing. There was no other point other than that's a thing. Other ways of differences.
I just had one more thought about the corporate participation, if that's all right. Like I feel like I have a lot of side eye for that, because I am naturally distrustful of large corporations, and I see it sometimes. It's like it's like they want our money, and yet you look at their internal corporate practices and they're not that equitable. And it's just like I love it and I hate it at the same time. There's a hypocrisy there from some of these corporations that I'm distrustful of. But we, on the other hand, can, I think, as a larger community, use their desire to get our money to our advantage. And so it's such a complicated issue. I don't know exactly how I feel about it.
Fair, right? I will say that June is the time I get asked to present the most, right? June being Pride Month. That is when I get asked to present the most. That is when all companies reach out to Gay City and they're like, we would like a training around Pride or the LGBTQ people competency 101. Then I will hear nothing from them. But June, this is why I'm like, if it's a training in June, I can't do it. That's when I have the most of them, right? So is that growth and reaching out important? Yeah. Why is it only in June? Right? So, all right, that the double-edged sword of the capitalist nature of corporations doing Pride things. Ooh, the age of people going to Pride. Yeah, more young people coming out. One really great thing, right? Especially in cities where prides are sort of built into the community. So I think y'all got it. Y'all gets it. So we did it. So we did past, less past, present-ish, future. So what will that look like? Well, let's center it in self-determination, okay? Because the future is hard to imagine. And since we experience time as linear, we got to sort of work through the ways that we can affect and support change. What is self-determination, you ask? Self-determination is the ability to choose how to live your life, right? My life, my path, right? So if we look at this graphic, which is tiny, I'll accept that. Self-determination is sort of the choice-making and thought process around how to support what you want to do. Starting off an intuition, right? The first part of self-determination that is often, oh, I forgot y'all can hear that, disputed is intuition, right? I feel, I know. And often one thing that we're taught to ignore, right? Where you go, I don't want to go over there. It feels weird. You may not know why it feels weird. You're like, I don't want to go over there. And you're told, go anyways. Right? I don't want to hug my aunt. Right? I don't want to go say hi to my uncle. And you're told, go anyways. Right? One of those first ways that our self-determination, right, is change, right? Choice, right? Intuition is what builds our ability to choose, right? So I want or I need. So you have that initial feeling. You choose based on I want, I need, or get to state that. If you were able to choose, right, and access to your choice and needs, you can reflect on that and continue to build forward, right? And that part is the self-determining sort of cycle, right? That feeling, the ability to think about a thing or know a thing of what you need, to reflect on what that did for you and continue to move forward. One, did I add it? I don't think I did. So one insidious aspect of oppression is it limits and deters the ability to self-determine. I'll say that again, that oppression limits and deters the ability to self-determine. Example, I would like to buy a house. The things that may be stopping me from buying a house are credit scores, right? We know that credit scores are initially based off of racist practice to make sure that BIPOC community members didn't have access to higher wealth needs. Who's selling the house, right? You may have seen this a while ago. It was an article where this gentleman was trying to sell his house with his wife. His wife is Black, and they had photos of their family across their house. People weren't interested in buying their house, so they took them all down. And weird, people were putting money on that house so much they got over their asking price on their house, right? That's a simple way that racism just shows up in self-determining, right? In the harder ways, right? Of if we think about, again, adultism, right? Where the oppression of adults onto youth, right? That example with having to hug your aunt or uncle, having to go do a thing that you don't want to do as a child. But let's keep it with LGBTQ identities, right? When we think of intuition and choice and reflection for LGBTQ people, right, in identity, right, we'll bring it back, marriage equality, in gender expression, in legal gender choices, right? These are all ways that self-determination of LGBTQ people are being stopped, right? So oppression limits and deters self-determination. That's a lot of things for one slide. So your brains aren't, no one has exploded. Great. For the, zero video people, I'm gonna hope that you haven't exploded. So this means that there has to be a shift in how we see supporting people, from ally to advocate. And I want to say right now, allies aren't necessarily bad things. I'm just saying there's more, right? Not necessarily bad, there's just more. So what's the role of an advocate? To advocate. And to advocate, right? To speak of your or someone not present's needs. To speak of yours or someone not present's needs. That's pretty great, right? To continually work, right? To learn and to listen, right? Ally is often a passive role, right? You get to label yourself an ally. That is, you choose instead of community chooses you, right? You get to say, I am an ally. I've done the thing, I believe a thing, great, right? An advocate gets to take that a little step further. It says, I'm gonna continually work to learn and listen from the community and communities I'm advocating for, right? Follows the lead of marginalized groups. So as a deaf advocate, that means that I don't get to show up as a hearing person to places and go, I would like to see changes for deaf people in this way, right? That's not fair. That's not fair. But instead, right, if deaf community was like, we need hearing people to go tell, the school board that we need changes in this, then I'm gonna show up and go, we need changes for this deaf community saying this is what we need, and y'all aren't listening. So I'm gonna use all of my hearing and wide privilege to show up and be like, do the thing, right? Take place instead of marginalized groups if there are none present or it is requested. See, haha, this face. Yes, take place instead of marginalized group if none are present or is requested. Again, right? That is, I combined those two of the follow the lead, right? If it is said, go on, right? So if one of my youth that I work with says, I don't want to talk to that teacher, they keep not listening to me. Can you go talk to them? I'm gonna show up. If I'm in a group and there are no youth, then I get to go, why are there no youth in this group that is for supporting youth? The youth I've talked to said that we need more youth at the things. Okay, go bye. I'm gonna go get the youth. We'll be back to go do this thing, right? Equally, well, I'm here running this group. We have no queer or trans people. Why don't we have queer or trans people with this group? Let's get queer or trans people in group. If, right, that space is supportive to queer and trans people. You just bring queer and trans people into a group that's super hateful, that's not going to be good either. That's not going to, you're being, right, a poor advocate. You did not check out that space is safe. Right? So advocacy, which y'all know now, right, taking particular actions to represent the interest of yourself and others, can look like, right, doing that for other people, but also for yourself. How are the ways that self-advocacy supports, right? I don't know if you'll get it in a second, self-determination. It's right there. Boom. Right? It's self-determination is your choices, right? Your needs. Self-advocacy is claiming and determining your needs, creating boundaries, right? The naming that is active in our lives, like gender identity, sexual identity, asking or demanding change. And last, my puppy, self-determining, right? So the two aspects of advocacy and being an advocate, one for communities that you care about and want to support, and for yourself, right? The two aspects of advocacy for communities and for yourself. So we did a lot, right? And we think about, I'll leave you here for a second. We think about the ways that the future of LGBTQ liberation has to continue to go, right? Has to be always rooted in the needs of our most marginalized, right? As the most marginalized face higher oppressions, meaning less access to self-determine, advocacy is the key needed for our future as a community, right? Advocacy can look like a lot, right? Advocacy doesn't always need to be legal advocacy, as we discussed, right? It can be self-advocacy. How are you creating that change that support those boundaries, right? That allow you to live well. If you are able to create those needs for yourself, you're able to create those needs for someone else. The future of LGBTQ liberation doesn't always need to be, again, about the one who will lead us in the charge, right? Because we know it's many people. That means that we got to be many people for ourselves and our communities. In self-determination, in advocacy, and self-advocacy. And supporting the self-determination of the most marginalized of our communities. So again, I told you I love Miss Major so much. When you are doing this out of care and concern, you really don't think about it as activism or a movement. You think of it as, for me, protecting my girls, right? Miss Major being trans activist, right? It's about the protection of community, right? It's not just, oh, I'm doing this because I want to be a famous activist, or I want to do it because of the movement, right? It's a protection of yourself and your communities. Also, LGBTQ movements are complex. That is a complex overlapping history. And that's okay. It's okay for it to be complex. It's okay for it to be not as great at times and super great at times, or people are missing from the stories, right? Because then we get to uplift them, talk about the ways that that was harmful, talk about the ways of moving forward, right? Creating those paths of self-advocacy, creating those paths of advocacy out of the liberation movements that we have seen and the liberation movements that we want to see. Many people make up the legacy of LGBTQ social movements and liberation, right? So many people, we name so many, but we know that there's people who weren't mentioned or brought up today. And we think about the future of LGBTQ movements, right? It is rooted in self-determination, rooted in the ability to have our communities be able to self-determine, to be able to live their lives, right? Which includes, right, any of y'all, right, LGBTQ or not. Self-determination is by nature an anti-oppressive practice. And the self-determination of LGBTQ people and communities is thus an anti-oppressive practice. Questions? How are your brains? No one exploded. Great.
I want to, I think I put it in the chat earlier, but there is an amazing documentary about Miss Major called Major! And it is on Amazon Prime and it's on Vimeo. I'll put a link to the Vimeo in the chat. But
Thanks
it is
so much for linking to the Vimeo.
yeah. It is so warm, and just like the people whose lives Miss Majors touched give the like this. Oh my God, it's such an amazing documentary. I can't
So
even.
good. It's so good. Watch it twice.
Yeah.
What else? Other things. Yay, such a good movie. Click that link and then so that it's out of the chat so you can get it. Oh, a request. Thank you for that. All right. A request so that questions can be supportive to whatever y'all are doing. Request for our tech wizard is to not record our question session. Right, again, the lessons get to leave with y'all. For this part, if there's any needs or any more concern to make it a little bit more comfortable or safe, questions will, at the end, will not be recorded. Does that sound like a plan? Anyone are like, but I really want to have my question recorded? Great.